Land of the free, home of the brave, dog bless America. This kooky land of cowboys, credit cards, consumerism and caloric cuisine is the world's preeminent economic, diplomatic, military and cultural superpower. Across the wide continent of natural wonders live 330 million people, a melting pot of different cultures, with people from all over the world coming together and contributing to the country's rich history and wide-reaching culture. Americans are some of the most well-to-do people in the world, with the highest incomes, the most material wealth, and the largest consumer market in the world. The United States is the global leader in technology and innovation, with most of the world's top companies and universities located within its borders. The American political system, one of the largest democracies in the world, is a spectacle of grandeur fit for the mighty republic which it governs. But despite its vast wealth, vast landscape, and vast portions, America also has problems. Americans lag behind their European counterparts in terms of life expectancy, crime rates, and child mortality. Healthcare costs are soaring. The poorest go without medical care. Gun crime is a plague on the nation. Income inequality ravishes the largest cities. Politics is the most polarized it has been in decades. So when I posited on Twitter that, given enough time, the United States will eventually become a utopia, I was unsurprised to be on the receiving end of ridicule. America, the comedic punching bag of the free world. A utopia? Very silly indeed. I was not deterred. I won't go into petty details about the particular policies America will use to get to this blissful state. It could be fully automated luxury space communism, or it could be hyper-commodified cocaine capitalism. It really doesn't matter. This video is about how the United States of America currently has all the building blocks required for that second Garden of Eden. They have been dealt a hand of aces that none of their competitors can match. The USA can rest easy knowing the only way in or out is through miles and miles of desert, ocean or Arctic wasteland. The USA's only neighbours are also decidedly not a threat, but if a particularly crafty empire could somehow manage to make its way through all of this, they'd find themselves with a military supply chain from hell trapped inside the world's largest private firearms market. The American military only exists to achieve geopolitical goals elsewhere in the world. The USA could abolish their military tomorrow and they'd still never be invaded. And so thanks to these 250 years in isolation, the Americans can devote their full attention towards exploiting their natural resources. With over 1 million square kilometers of arable farmland, the most in the entire world, Americans are not short of food, especially potatoes and grain, and while this has led to some interesting diets, it's not a bad thing. "Oh no, we have too much cheap food," said nobody ever. On the western side of the country, these Rocky Mountains harness gold, copper, silver, lead, uranium, tungsten, zinc, coal, natural gas, oil and petroleum. There's also 188 million acres of forest to harvest lumber. And if you need any more than that, there's always Canada. 2/3 of their exports go to the United States. They're basically America's resource tiles. Anything anyone could ever want or need is within the borders of the United States. The proof can be seen in how little the USA imports from other countries. 41% of Germany's economy is based around buying things from other countries. But that's only 13% of the American economy, the 5th lowest in the world. They make everything in-house. These homemade products can easily be transported across the country via an extensive network of natural rivers and lakes, wide enough and deep enough for commercial large-scale shipping. And for the places without rivers? Surprise! It's all flat. You can slap down 140,000 miles of railroad and accidentally create the most efficient freight rail network known to mankind. And in the off chance you absolutely must buy Italian wine over Californian wine, importing is a breeze, because this entire seaboard is covered in the world's longest string of barrier islands. Every other country has to spend billions building and maintaining ports, while Mother Nature is over here handing out free harbours to the Americans.
America is big, have lots of geography, so what? Mother Russia is bigger, stronger. Why not Russia become great orthodox power against degenerate America?
I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Russia, but I know somebody who does, so I got him to do it for me. Take it away, Zoomers.
Hey, I'm Zoomers, and today I'm gonna tell you why Russia is doomed. Let's begin with the fact that Russia is a country with different climate zones. While someone is standing at the beach, the other side of Russia can be icy cold, and this is what happens in lots of areas. But the majority of Russia struggles with hostile weather conditions that can be described as cold, or I would even say cold as f***. Russians love to remember how their motherland turned all the invaders into icicles, from Napoleon to Hitler, making them retreat. So the saying, "what's healthy for a Russian is deadly to a German," got firmly ingrained in the minds of Russians. But someone forgot to inform Putin that it doesn't really work when you are the one attacking the other nation and not the one being attacked. So alas, it didn't work with Ukraine. Well, first thing, waging a war against a neighboring country in 2022 to expand your territories is not the best decision. The Tatar-Mongol yoke couldn't do it, and let me remind you, everyone was terrified of them, so obviously Russia doesn't have a chance in hell. The next point, resources. Russian propaganda loves saying that the whole Europe deeply depends on Russian oil and gas, and that now they are not gonna be able to fuel their cars and keep their houses warm. But actually, let's be real here. Russia is the one deeply dependent on the oil. The only one thing keeping the country afloat is oil, because it can't really provide the world with anything else. Russia doesn't really have any domestic production. Well, of course it does, but how do I put it? Russian car industry is like Russian football, the butt of the joke since the very first day. For the most part, Russia buys all the equipment from drones to cars in China and increases the price by 200 or 300%, making it seem like it was made in Russia. So the second reason why Russia is doomed is the absence of domestic production that could compete with the rest of the world. And we are getting to the third reason. What about Russia's West territories? It is so cool when your country is so big, right? Russia is often equal to Moscow, and it's truly a great metropolitan city that has everything you could possibly need. But look how small Moscow is compared to the rest of Russia. Because, as they say, theatrical props are beautiful only from the front, and on the other side you can see that they're actually made out of unpainted woodboards. These unpainted woodboards represent real Russia. Having West territories is obviously cool, but it is harder to run a big country than a smaller one. And with Putin it's like entrusting a toddler with a huge house. So it's unsurprising that lots of areas in Russia look like this. By the way, do you know how much apartments cost here? Better sit down. You can buy a 2-room apartment just for 3.5 grand, but you would be buying an apartment in a dead area. So if your goal is to become an alcoholic and freeze to the death in the snow on your way home, this would be a perfect investment for you. When Putin started the war, his citizens already basically lived in wartime conditions. Houses with no heating, the lack of schools and kindergartens. So the third reason why Russia is doomed is complete disunity and social fragmentation, where lots of cities, and I'm not even talking about villages here, actual cities, are underdeveloped with poor infrastructure, looking like it's still last century. There is a well-known phrase, allegedly uttered by either Marie Antoinette or Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If they have no bread, let them eat cake. Same story with Putin. He ended up in a situation where he didn't know or didn't want to know what was happening in his country. It was proved that he was given fake reports just to pacify him, because angering the Tsar could cost people their lives. And the longer you are surrounded by illusions, the more painful it will be to find out the truth. And the truth is that Russia under Putin's rule is completely and utterly 100% doomed. And by the way, I have a YouTube channel where I post interesting videos on a variety of different topics. Please subscribe, it would really help.
Natural resources aside, climate is also part of what makes a country an attractive place to live, and I would argue that anything less than a perfect climate automatically disqualifies that nation from utopia status. You can point to Norway or Ireland or Australia and say, these countries have the best living standards, but they don't have the best weather. For you personally, maybe. In America, whether you like swampy marshes, blistering deserts, Arctic tundras, or quiet logging towns, there's something for everyone. Don't like your state's geography? Just move somewhere else. In America, you get options. In Norway, you don't. Okay, but what about the European Union? Here's a continent with better living standards than America, as well as a vast, varied terrain with lots of natural resources. When the European Federation is founded, they will be the closest to utopia, not America. Very good point. A European Federation would be a strong competitor in the race for perfection. Here's why they won't win. Many Americans don't seem to appreciate the fact that they live in an economy that is almost always good. Aside from the token recession, America has seen near constant growth since the end of World War II, so the average American only gets richer every year. Compare this with Western Europe. Most of us have been in and out of recession since 2008, so most of us are as poor as we were 15 years ago, and it doesn't seem like our leaders really have a plan to fix this. The average American household has $60,000 of disposable income, the highest in the world, and that's after tax and social security and health insurance premiums. It's double the European average. I don't even know anyone who makes $60,000 a year. It is entirely possible for a 16-year-old working at a grocery store in Oklahoma to make as much per month as the average Belgian. On s'en fout, says the Europeans. Le American capitalism is, how you say, ruthless, exploitative. They have no workers' rights. American cities, they are ugly. They have like gun crime. Yeah, Europeans are happier. We are less stressed. Money is not everything.
Yeah, and at least we have free healthcare, innit? Stupid Yanks.
And while true, money is not everything, money is freedom and security, which allows people to do what they want in life. America has $5 trillion to spend on its citizens per year. The Department of Health and Human Services alone spends more than every country in the world, except 4. Do they do it efficiently? Hell no. That's just the kind of money you get to play with when you are a wealth-generating society. When you have general managers at gas stations in America making more than the Prime Minister of Spain, maybe it's worth considering there's a problem with your economy. Don't be mistaken, I would rather live in Milan over Miami, but I would also like to make $60,000 after tax. Check your browsing history or the apps you have installed on your phone. What websites and apps have you visited in the past 24 hours? What countries are they from? With the exception of one, they're probably not European. Technology is the cutting edge that will keep America ahead while other countries lag behind. During the coronavirus pandemic, the smooth functioning of our entire planet relied on American tech, and we didn't talk to each other on such valuable global European websites like takeaway.com or BlaBlaCar. We didn't take online classes through the chat feature on Clash of Clans. Not just in consumer technology. Americans lead the way in space travel and artificial intelligence, which will surely play a key role in the next 100 years. The American government knows technology is their golden goose. In 2022, Congress passed the CHIPS Act, investing $280 billion into science and technology on top of the $65 billion they are already investing per year. While EU bureaucrats wade through court cases trying to get Apple and Google to pay their taxes, the Americans give them a tax cut instead. In 2017, Congress passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which lowered corporation tax from 35% to 21%. Here's what happened next. American Airlines, AT&T, Bank of America, Comcast and Walmart gave free cash bonuses to all their employees. Verizon gave their 155,000 employees $400 million worth of free shares in the company. JP Morgan Chase invested $20 billion in creating 4,000 new jobs. Apple returned $250 billion in assets it was holding offshore. And Uncle Sam didn't need to tax a single cent. If you've ever wondered why Americans making $50,000 per year vehemently defend tax cuts for the super rich, it's not because the tax cuts will affect them now. Most Americans see themselves as only 1 or 2 years away from being multimillionaires and being put in that tax bracket. This belief isn't completely unfounded. 12% of Americans will spend at least 1 year of their life in the richest 1%, and over half will spend at least a year in the richest 10%. Although this does work the other way around, the same number will also find themselves in the poorest 10% at some point in their lives. I guess Americans really do control their own fate, and that is a powerful thing. From the guy who quits his office job for a better salary elsewhere, to an investment banker bailing on a multi-billion-dollar company, risks are encouraged at all levels of society, because when the risk pays off, everybody reaps the benefits. But when all your basic needs are met, you have a 35-hour work week and ample vacation time in a unionized office job, why bother going the extra mile? These things aren't bad, but it has led to many cuddly European social democracies like Denmark to suffer from crabs in a bucket mentality, where dreams of success are looked down upon. The only thing Europe seems to be competitive in is fossil fuels and cars, and one of those industries is going to be obsolete very soon. How about, instead of begging the Americans to wait for you to play catch-up, you, get good? In the past 5 years, the EU has struggled to maintain consistent investments into research and development, and while these guys throw money at it without a second thought, some European leaders argue that $100 billion per year over the next decade is too much and should be reduced. Instead, they prefer to regulate American innovations rather than foster their own. Their headline policies over the last few years are forcing all devices to use the same charging cable design, and forcing all websites to have an annoying pop-up window. I just feel like there's more you could be doing to make people want to make things. I can already hear you angry continentals hammering away in the comments, so let me be clear. Yes, Britain is pretty useless at this too. Recently, the government came up with a vague proposal to build a Silicon Valley-type web of innovation zones between Oxford and Cambridge. Unfortunately, local residents hate this idea and it will probably never happen. Maybe next time, you shouldn't try to build a world-class futuristic technology hub in cities filled with people who are strongly attached to their UNESCO World Heritage Victorian architecture.
What did you think was gonna happen? Are you just a fucking idiot?
Is throwing away billions in economic growth and higher wages really worth it just to force everyone to click an annoying pop-up every time they try to access a website? Or to preserve Janet's view of an empty field? I don't think so. But that is the path Europe has chosen. They are content with being the freeloader continent. Fine. Though I should mention, engineers and software developers in Europe earn less than half of what their American counterparts are making. European leaders better hope and pray that the USA doesn't expand high-skill immigration visas, because then Europe will probably have to introduce immigration controls to stop all their best programmers and scientists moving to America. Free healthcare and walkable cities be damned in the face of double the salary. How do I know this would happen? This graph shows the migration of patent holders, people who have invented things. As you can see, China, India, and most of Europe, the USA's biggest competitors, are facing a net loss of inventors and innovators. Here is where they are all going. If any American cougar MILFs want to let me marry them for a green card, I'm single. Call me. Europe simply doesn't have the mindset to create an economy as powerful and resilient as the United States, and this is why Europe will not win the race to Utopia. Things could change, but the entrenched European bureaucracy, satisfaction with the status quo, and a misplaced sense of superiority makes this unlikely. They will be indefinitely reliant on other countries, which is fine for now, but as we've seen, things change. But you know who can compete with the US economy? China. They've seen unprecedented growth in living standards since the 1990s. A powerful economy that makes everything from high-tech computers to cheap plastic toys. They even have good geography. It's so over for Americans. Socialism with Chinese characteristics will produce the first utopia. The Chinese century is here. 伟大光荣中国的中国中长长万岁。
我爱北京天安门，天安门上太阳升。伟大领袖毛主席指引我们向前进。
When Chinese school children are taught that human rights are overrated and inefficient, and all that matters is how well off the population is, this isn't propaganda. It's what the Chinese government actually believes. Is democracy a mean to an end, or is it an end to itself? This question has stumped philosophers and bored PPE students the world over for centuries. If there was a system of government that produced better outcomes than democratic elections, should we take away the right to vote from the public for their own good? If you think democracy and civil liberties is the end goal, the United States is the clear winner of the two. While there is certainly a lot of work to be done, particularly in the criminal justice system, only in evil fascist America do they give you the unrestricted right to say whatever you want and own an unlimited number of guns. If you want to protest in China, you just... But let's give China the benefit of the doubt. Civil liberties don't matter if everything else is good. Heaven is a kingdom, as they say. In previous videos, I have been pretty China alarmist, and for the longest time I really did believe that they were going to eat the West alive and become the dominant global power. But then in the past year or so, I've come to realise that actually no, they won't. At the same time, I'm also not going to be like those crazy crypto finance YouTubers who predict the imminent demise of China any day now.
Guys, China's collapsing. The stock market is collapsing. 48 hours until the coup starts. It's coming, guys. Trust me. Z has 24 hours to save the CCP.
Nope, not happening. The decline will be slow and unimpressive. China's construction spree is quite astounding, with massive cities turning up overnight. But they're actually useless. The roads go nowhere, the houses are empty, the streets are deserted. In a previous video I said it was to lure rural farmers into the city, and I was wrong. That whole video sucks. F*** video. They exist because of your average, everyday Chinese citizen. The public are encouraged to buy real estate as a form of investment. How it works is, construction companies take investor money, then they build the property. You can see where the problem arises, right? That's 30% of the economy in an industry that isn't making any money. I'm all in favour of building more houses, but there comes a point where it's like selling honey to a bee. Eventually the Ponzi scheme will collapse, and that's a third of the Chinese economy vanished overnight. You may remember when the USA had their own housing bubble in 2007. The effects were devastating when it burst, and it took them the better part of 6 years to recover. That was when construction was 7% of the economy. Now, of course, China can weather the storm. They've spent the past 15 years building a global trade network tilted in their favour. But even if the Chinese economy stays competitive, and even if the central Chinese state survives in its present form long into the 21st century, that's just more caking of shit on the ticking time bomb ready to blow up any dreams of the Chinese utopia. China's population is decreasing. People are getting older, fewer people are being born. China's one-child policy might have seemed like a smart idea when everyone was convinced overpopulation was a big problem. Spoiler alert, it's not. But today we know they've shot themselves in the foot. The number of over 60s in China is set to reach 40% of the population by 2050, peaking at nearly half of Chinese people being a retiree in 2080. A lot of pensions will need to be paid, which means a lot of tax rises and a large percent of the economy devoted towards supporting pensioners. That means less room for education, infrastructure, and other government programs. You could dispose of the elderly. The Politburo aren't above mass Minecrafting, but I don't think they have the infrastructure to dispose of hundreds of millions of bodies. Decades down the line, after the population stabilizes and the construction bubble is burst, China will recover. And they may one day be as good as America. But they are already far behind. The big cities look good and give the impression that China is beating the USA, but the more rural you get, there are still cities with millions of people that wouldn't look out of place in a third world country. Beijing has the highest average salary in all of China, and it's still lower than the average in every single US county except 2. And those counties have prisons in them, so it skews the average way down, with all the inmates printing license plates for $2 an hour. Hundreds of millions of old people to care for, and the eventual setback of the real estate bubble means China will not be the first country to achieve utopia. There is a way out of this. China could save their asset bubble and their demographic collapse. It's really quite simple. They have to invite millions of immigrants over to plug the gap in the workforce and occupy all those empty cities. But don't hold your breath. While the past doesn't guarantee the future, the number of foreigners in China is 0.1% of the population, and less than 2,000 non-Chinese have been able to obtain Chinese citizenship in the past 10 years. Which is unfortunate, because if the economy is America's golden goose, then immigrants are the golden farmer? I did not think this metaphor through. It was the founding father of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, who said it best. China could draw on a talent pool of 1.3 billion people, but the United States could draw on the world's talent pool of 7 billion people and recombine them into a diverse culture that exudes creativity in a way that ethnic nationalism cannot. Despite popular perceptions, the United States has one of the most welcoming immigration systems in the world. Anyone with an immediate family member who is a US citizen can go and live with them in the US of A. Their spouse, their children, their parents, their brothers, their sisters, even if they are illegitimate or adopted. Each year, 120,000 residency permits are reserved for high-skill immigrants, with another 9,000 for wealthy people who invest more than $1 million in the US economy. Up to 125,000 refugees are granted entry every year. 55,000 people from countries with low immigration to the USA are awarded green cards by lottery, and citizenship is granted to around 800,000 people per year who have lived or worked in the USA legally for around 10 to 25 years. Plus, citizenship is immediately granted to anyone who is born inside American borders, or in most American territories, or in a plane flying over American airspace, or in the grounds of an American embassy, or on an American military base, or on a ship flying the American flag, or in American coastal waters, or if one of their parents is an American citizen, or if they were born in the 13 colonies prior to March 4th, 1787, although I don't think there are many of those left. I could be wrong though. Kill me! No matter how crazy the Americans get, millions of people will vote with their feet every year and take their shot at the American dream, legally or illegally. The world's smartest, richest, hardest working and most creative people are being strip-mined by the USA to create the strongest and wealthiest country on earth. And nobody is more patriotic than American immigrants. As British-born American politician Marjorie Lynch once said,
"The tenets of American democracy are particularly cherished when you are not born to them, but with deliberation and conviction adopt them for your own."
This is an advantage that Europe or Russia or China will never have. But what about the people themselves? If the USA is to be a utopia, then these policies are worthless if people of all races can't live together in harmony. Opinion polls are promising. Almost 60% of Americans agree that growing diversity makes their country a better place to live, compared to a third of Brits, Swedes or Spaniards, and a quarter of French or Germans. Support for immigration is at its highest in America since the 1960s. And in a survey of 60 countries, less than 5% of Americans said they would object to somebody of a different race living next door to them. Your mileage may vary if you're a black man getting pulled over for a speck of dust on your taillight. Of course, if you ask people, are you a racist, they're gonna say no.
Do you use the N-word?
No. That's a lie.
But we can also look at data which reveals unconscious bias too, such as job applications. These researchers tracked the responses of 200,000 job applications in 9 countries. On average, an American with a black-sounding name has to send out 36% more job applications than somebody with a white name to hear back from an employer. But black Brits, black Canadians, and especially black French people need to send out way more. Only black Belgians and black Dutch fare better. The same is true for Asians, and Latino Americans are more successful in the job market than Latino Canadians. That's not to say America doesn't have issues. They clearly do, and I don't deny that. But at least Americans are open about it. In fact, in their quest to fix it, they even overcompensate. It is ridiculously easy to vote in America, in order to undo the voter literacy tests of the Jim Crow era. Affirmative action allows universities to show preference in admissions to historically marginalized groups. And I guarantee that nobody else was considering decolonizing math before the Americans did. Like, take for example France. I have nothing against French people in particular. My supermodel girlfriend is French. She goes to a different school. You don't know her. But less than 15 years ago, the French president ordered an expulsion of 18,000 Roma from the country just because a small portion of them were criminals. Can you imagine the uproar if the American president did that today? You might remember the time the president tried to ban people from certain countries entering the United States, and he was hit by lawsuit after lawsuit until eventually the courts overruled him. Last year, the French version of CNN tried to blame Muslim chefs for cooking oil shortages.
Cette pénurie s'explique dans un premier temps par l'arrivée du Ramadan. Cette huile est très utilisée par les musulmans pour préparer les beignets traditionnels de rupture du jeûne.
And the French word for ghostwriter is... Wait, I can't say that! Meanwhile, Turks in Germany, regardless of citizenship or if they were born there, are often called guest workers that live in their guest country. They are merely visitors who are just tolerated. They are shunned out of the labour market as German businesses don't recognise Turkish degrees, and the unions are for real citizens only. Turkish Americans, on the other hand, are just that, Turkish Americans. They are more educated than the average American, earn more than the average American, and the flexible American labour market allows Turks the economic opportunity to integrate into society instead of being forced into the crime-infested underworld. Turks are fully assimilated into American society. And we can tell this by how they vote. Turks who live abroad are allowed to vote in Turkish elections. 63% of German Turks voted for Erdogan, the authoritarian Islamist president of Turkey who vows to strengthen Turkish and Islamic culture from Western decadence. 71% of Turks in Austria. This is a much higher percentage than Erdogan got from Turks in Turkey. And over in the United States, Erdogan got 16% of the vote. Turkish Americans have been absorbed into American culture. They are not Turks in America, they are simply Americans. Once again, I must reiterate that the USA is not perfect. It is pretty obvious that more work needs to be done, and I'm not trying to whitewash over the problems. Though I will point out one more reason why the USA beats the rest of the world. The American dream is real. For immigrants. The children of immigrants are, on average, richer than the children of US-born parents, no matter where in the world they come from. 44% of Fortune 500 companies have at least one founder who is an immigrant or the child of immigrants. And 80% of American millionaires are first generation. One final thing I do want to touch on is the national culture of America. One might say that the USA can't ever be a utopia because it has no culture, just vapid materialism, Marvel movies, fast food, and clapping when the plane lands. Which is just patently false, and in the 21st century, saying America has no culture is like a fish saying water doesn't exist. But even if it were true, the constant flow of immigrants from all over the world, from every society, brings with them their own traditions. If America has no culture, this would only make the country better. It means that the best aspect of every culture in the world rises to the top, creating a superculture, better than all else. They get black music, Mexican holidays, Chinese food, English literature, German ingenuity, Jewish comedy, Indian programmers, Italian fashion, Cuban cigars, and Japanese cartoons. To recap, the United States is the only country in the world with all of the following: perfect geography, a varied landscape, a location making it impossible to be successfully invaded, a resilient, self-sufficient economy, entrepreneurial spirit, technological superiority, a guarantee of civil liberties, a stable population, a welcoming immigration system, and a society that strives, more than others, for racial equality. Once the Americans have overcome their gun crime, healthcare costs, obesity crisis, ugly cities, and obsession with clapping after the plane lands, seriously, why do they do that? They will almost certainly be the greatest country that can ever be achieved. Hopefully you do that soon so I can pack my bags and get out of this hellhole. What does this mean for the rest of the world? Unlike Americans who can just sit and wait for their utopia to arrive, we have to work towards it. If utopia is even possible. At the very least, if we can't be utopian, then we can at least be protopian. We don't have to make things perfect, we just have to make things better. I'm not really sure how to end this video, so here's a list of everything the United States is the best in the world at. Thanks for watching.